Up, everybody?
What up?
It's Tackle Tuesday. It is 7:59.
Getting started early.
Dude, we made it on time tonight. Crazy. It's 7:59. Tonight we are covering our final. Oopsies. Tonight we are covering our final discussion on crankbaits, and we will be talking about deep cranking.
Deep cranking, one of my favorite things to do. I love deep cranking. It's pretty uncommon to deep crank around, in the tidal waters. We do a lot of shallow water fishing, but when you get into some of the lakes, some of the reservoirs, when you're fishing the reservoirs and that more traditional that have that more traditional bass movement where they come up. They winter deep, they come up shallow to spawn, and then they move back deep in the summertime. Deep cranking is one of my favorite things to do. Like Conowingo. I do a lot of deep cranking on Conowingo. Fair amount. I've done a fair amount on Deep Creek. I do a lot of deep cranking on Lake Anna. Anytime that it's really, for me, it's mostly a summertime thing. So
it's mostly a summertime thing for you.
Because you think in the wintertime their metabolism slows. They don't want this thing coming by their face. They're just gonna ignore this. I mean, this is a giant piece of plastic. So wintertime you're throwing more of your silver buddies and things like that. But in the summertime, when this fish move out on, if you're looking at like Tennessee River lakes or Texas, where they're moving out on ledges, they're moving out on drop-offs, deep grass. If you get clear lakes that have deep grass lines, like Rayburn, deep cranking is the ticket. You can catch really, really big fish, and a lot of it is just getting a bait down to a depth that those fish are living in, because in a lot of our, I won't say a lot of our lakes, but a lot of the lakes in the country, these fish are living in the summertime. They're going out into, and we're talking about largemouth, 18, 19, 25 feet of water, 30 feet of water. And you just have to get a bait down to them. And that's what deep cranking is designed for, is to be able to get down to those deeper fish that are feeding on shad. I'm going to show you. You'll see a common pattern with all my baits that I showed tonight, but they're typically going to be like a shad pattern. That's what you're after. You're after those fish that are out deep, eating your gizzard shad, and to a lesser extent threadfin shad, but mostly you're concentrating on fish that are eating those gizzard shad. So this works really well on gizzard shad lakes. Same places like where your flutter spoons and things like that are going to work,
right?
Because you're really focusing on those fish that are out deep feeding on those bigger bait fish, and that's why you throw things like this. I mean, this is bigger than my hand. It's a big crankbait.
That's the biggest crankbait I've ever seen.
It's made to represent a gizzard shad. Funny story: this crankbait right here, this exact crankbait, first fish I ever caught on it was a 6-inch smallmouth.
That's crazy.
Because, smallmouth ridiculous.
Yes, they are.
But first, we're gonna go through some of the baits and defining deep cranking. We've worked, with this 3-part series. We've talked about shallow cranks, where we were looking at 0 to 6 feet, and then your mid-depth cranks in that 6 to 12, and anything over 12 I consider deep cranking. So you're really going to start with like a smaller bait. When you're talking in that, this is a Strike King 5XD, 12 to 14 feet, somewhere in that range. Your DT14, that's a Rapala DT14. That's a money color too. Anybody can get a good look at that. DT16. So
what is so your DT14 and your DT16 different depths?
Yes. So Rapala is really good. They have their DT series, which stands for dives too. So all of the
dives,
numbers is how far they dive. So if you're new into deep cranking and you're kind of thinking like, well, I want to fish this depth, or my lake's this deep. Rapala is a good one to go to because it tells you exactly how far they deep. And now that is on 12-pound line, 12-pound fluoro. You will get those to run to 14 feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's a DT14, runs to 14 feet on you get it on a long cast, 12-pound fluoro, it's going to get to 14 feet. DT16 is going to get to 16 feet. DT20 is going to get to 20 feet. So Rapala is a good place to start. If you're looking to get into deep cranking, that's a really good place to start. That's because you don't have the right equipment, Greg. And to answer your other question about flutter spoons up in the river with all the mud rolling down through, probably not. Because there is a lot of rain coming down from Haverty Grace, and that river is going to be chocolate milk. My opinion, I could be wrong, but a lot of that depends on how much water.
You don't think the fish are going to dive deep though because of all the mud coming down?
Traditionally, if water gets muddy, fish move shallower. They don't move deeper. So if you run into muddy conditions, deep cranking is probably not the way to go. You want to move shallower, go right to the bank, fish shallow structure, shallow hardcover, wood docks. They're going to be either shallower if it's muddy, or find cleaner water. Grass is going to filter out your water. Grass is going to be a little bit cleaner. We talked about that with the Thursday night that I won. When we talked about that on one of our Friday shows, just being able to find a little bit cleaner water, and those fish just moved into that area. Mm-hmm. So as far as deep cranking goes, Greg hates throwing anything over a DT10. If you hate throwing anything over a DT10, it's because you're not throwing it on the right equipment. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But these crankbaits are going to vary in weight from, usually about a half an ounce on your smaller ones, mm-hmm. all the way up to, this is a 2-ounce bait. So you have to have a rod capable of throwing deep cranks.
Now it's only half an ounce, but that's a lot of drag created by these crankbaits. The drag created by these crankbaits in itself puts the rod, in my opinion, it kind of has to be in a different class.
So you're definitely only throwing moderate action. You need that moderate action. That moderate action will take a lot of that strain off of you, because the rod's going to give with the thump of the crankbait. I mean, if you fish one of these on like a fast action rod, it's just going to vibrate the hell out of your hand, and you're not going to have any fun. So you have to throw it on a moderate action to dampen some of that. Your drag, you can't throw these on a 7-to-1. You throw these on a 7-to-1, you're going to have pop. You're either not going to be able to move your arm the next day, or you're going to have like Popeye forearms.
Yeah.
Because the higher gear ratios, you don't have as much torque. It's not as easy to turn. I deep crank exclusively with 5.3. Right around 5.2, 5.3, 5.4 to 1. Mm-hmm. Very, very low gear ratios. You have a lot more torque. It's a lot easier to turn. Even if you have to burn them, it's still a lot easier on you because you just have so much more torque with those lower gear ratios. So I guess we're talking about equipment now. So we were going to talk about that anyway. It's got a lot of art. So, and this is because of Greg's question. Hate throwing anything over a T10. If you have the right setup for the right baits, it's not as much work. It's not like it used to be. It used to be back in the day when you're throwing like a DD22 or something like that. They pulled, and they pulled hard because you didn't have the rods built for them.
I feel like it's much harder to pinpoint a lot of your structure and everything too when you get deeper than 10, 12 feet.
To me, not really. I don't really have an issue with it, depending on what I'm throwing. If you're throwing like a super mega deep crankbait, again, you're throwing like a 2-ounce bait. It's just like anything else. You're probably gonna throw on a little heavier line. Mm-hmm. And you got so much drag that sometimes you can't tell the difference between like wood and rock.
What are you throwing that on?
12.
12-pound fluoro?
I'll throw that on 12-pound fluoro.
Okay.
Doesn't really affect me much. I would say when you first start using them, a big deep crank, like this is a 10XD. When you first start throwing them, you might want to use like 15, because you will. I mean, it's like throwing a big swim bait. If you throw it on too light a line, you're going to pop it off. Some things happen, right? You get a backlash, and the thing just goes 200 yards in the direction you were casting. So a lot like throwing a big swim bait. Anybody who's familiar with that, these big deep cranks are going to be a lot like that. You're right with that, because I'm very much tired of what's getting caught in that. 2 weeks in a row. So when you're throwing your great big crankbaits like this, I throw them on 12-pound line. I have no problem throwing them on 12-pound line. Sometimes, even on a big crankbait like this, I might drop down to 10. You just have to be really careful when you're casting. The nice thing is, and you've probably noticed this in the swim bait world, because you're throwing a big heavy bait, you don't backlash a lot, because your bait has so much momentum.
It is rolling.
It never really slows down before it hits the water. So you don't.
As long as your reel is down. I mean, obviously, I have backlashed.
Oh yeah.
Throwing swim baits. Yeah. I mean, I lost $100 glide bait on a backlash one time. Rest in peace. I still miss that glide bait.
I've never lost one on the first glide bait I ever bought. I lost back in the forbidden zone. Because my line got wrapped, was like whipped around the end of my rod.
Yep.
And I leaned back, won that thing out, and it just went pop, and about hit Michael Duarte's boat. He was like 100 yards away from me.
I lost an 8-inch mag draft, and not an 8-inch mag. I lost an 8-inch Huddleston in there.
Oh, there's $55 down there.
Earlier in the season, I was throwing an 8-inch Huddleston like early spring.
Yeah.
Back in the forbidden zone, just kind of slowly rolling it, and I popped up over something, and it kind of like got a little bit stuck. I thought something might have had it. I kind of went to go like nudge it just to like pop it up over it, and it just like
that sucks.
I think it rubbed up against a piece of metal down there.
Metal or rock, and
it just like the line just cut the line.
So that's so going back to setup and why Greg hates throwing anything bigger than a DT10. So if I'm throwing like a 5XD, I can throw a 5XD on a medium action rod. I don't have too much of an issue with that. 5XD pool is kind of hard, but not too bad. Your DT14s, DT16s, they tend to have a little more drag. Throwing those on a medium heavy. DT14, DT16, even DT20. I'll throw a DT20 on a medium heavy. When you start getting into 6XD, medium heavy, moderate action. I'm going to talk about length in a minute, because there's something really important with length. When I start getting into my 8XDs and 10XDs, those are getting thrown on heavy action. They're big baits. You need a big, heavy rod.
Heavy action, moderate.
Everything's moderate. And, from the square bills to the mid-sized cranks.
This is all medium, heavy, moderate.
Medium, heavy, moderate, heavy, moderate. The only thing I'll throw in a heavy moderate is 8XD, 10XD. So we have a heavy moderate, 5.3-to-1 reel. Low gear, you want a low speed reel. You can probably get away with like a 6.3 at the most if you're throwing some of the smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're throwing like up to maybe like a DT16. When you start getting into bigger crankbaits, like your 6XDs, DT20s, you really want that 5.3-to-1, because it's just going to work you. I mean, it will wear you out.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much drag on them. But that rod, fishing a medium heavy rod versus a medium, that's going to help absorb some of that and make it a little bit easier, because you're not reeling so much flex into the rod. Your gear ratio is the other thing that makes that easier. Like I said earlier, more torque, lower gear ratios, easier to reel. It's not going to wear you out. Rod length. So as long as you can buy. That is the biggest thing with deep cranking is you have to be able to make a really, really long cast. If you don't make a really long cast, so when your bait hits the water, it's going to dive down, it's going to get to its max depth, and then it's going to, for however long your cast is, it's going to go at its max depth, and then it's going to come back up. So the longer your cast is, the longer it's going to stay down at that level you want it.
It's going to get into the strike zone.
Exactly. And you want to keep it in that strike zone as long as possible. So the longer cast you can make, the longer you can keep it in that strike zone. Mm-hmm. So when I say as long as possible, I'm talking 710, 711. St. Croix actually makes a 9-foot crankbait rod.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's their I think they call it like their mag crankbait rod. It's specifically for 10XDs, those big oversized crankbaits. Then there are other ones out there. Lucky Craft makes some that are those big oversized deep crankbaits. Mm-hmm. It's made specifically for those, so you can just bomb them as far as you can. That being said, I can't fit a 9-foot rod in my boat, so that probably I'll stick with my 710.
I can't get a 9-footer in mine either.
710, 711, somewhere in that range is a really good. That's a really good size for your deep crankbaits. Your smaller deep crankbaits, it's hard to get a 7'11" that'll throw a 5/8 ounce bait like this. So in your medium heavy 7.6, you can get a good 7.6, 7.8. Mm-hmm. You can get something in that range, but you run a long rod to make a long cast.
And this is specific for deep cranking. I'm trying to think of other purposes where you could even repurpose the rod at 7'10", 7'10", moderate.
7'10" moderate. It's really hard to.
It's like really that is very, very bait specific.
If you really want to bomb a chatterbait, you could do that. You could use it for, especially if you're fishing, like ledge fishing chatterbaits. They make like a 3/4 1 ounce jackhammer that are made specifically for ledge fishing, to fish down deeper in that 15, 16, 17 foot zone. You could probably use it for that if that's something you were doing, but mm-hmm. It's really going to be very specific to deep cranking.
So yeah, if you're gonna purchase one of these rods, you might as well just build it specifically. You might as well get that 5 to 3 year ratio reel, and just that is it.
And you really need, for deep cranking, you really need 2 rods, because you need one for your if you're going to throw those oversized cranks, you need a rod specific to them.
Right.
And you can use those for not just deep cranking. So like some of that like oversized square bills, would work well on a rod like that. Like your Strike King, the KVD 4.0 and 8.0, which are big oversized square bills. Mm-hmm. That's a square bill with a body this big, the 8.0.
I could utilize that.
Yeah. And that rod will work for that too. Who else? The Lucky Craft SKT Magnum is another oversized square bill. It's a big, 1 3/4 ounce square bill. That's got a 4-inch body on it. That's made to show those bigger baits. So, swim baits aren't the only big baits out there. Even though this is half the size of the swim bait you throw.
Half the size, but just as much drag.
More.
Yeah.
Probably more.
Yeah, exactly. But I can one of the things, so here's another question that I have for you, something that I actually think that we missed in the topic of crankbaits. And this can apply to crankbaits and jerkbaits, which is a whole other topic.
Oh yeah. Can't wait to get into that one.
Suspending and floating crankbaits. So I think a floating crankbait just seems. What's up, Brian? It seems unnatural to me. So diving down, stops, and then it just kind of seems unnatural. I would think that something that kind of dives down and then stops and sits where it was.
So yeah,
then kind of continues.
I can see that, and sometimes I guess you need that long. If you need that long pause, when I'm pausing a crankbait, it's a split second pause.
Right.
I'm reeling. Like, that's all my pause is. So that bait is it's just going to stop and go like that and then go back down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just barely stopping. So I've never really seen the need for a suspending crankbait. The other thing is, if you get a suspending crankbait hung, it's not coming off. Floating crankbait, you get that bill hung, hung down. Sometimes you can stop it and it'll just float back because it's going to float. When it floats up, they don't float straight up. They'll float kind of backwards.
Which is partially why the freaking UMA lures crankbaits that we have from Tyler are like some of the best of like they float so good. Those balsa wood crankbaits. Check out UMA Lure Company. Go to their website and look at all the crankbaits that Tyler makes. Message him and get set up and get you some of the best crankbaits on the market. They all come with fantastic owner hardware. Can't beat it.
So that's one thing. One thing that I don't like about suspending is because if it, that digs down and you get that bill kind of wedged in a rock,
mm-hmm.
It's just going to sit there. Where with your floating crankbait, bill comes down, it gets kind of wedged. Yep. You just give it some slack, it'll just kind of float. It'll just kind of float out.
I definitely do feel like this has more to do with the jerkbait throwing from floating to suspending, in my opinion, than crankbaits. Because crankbaits, you're burning a lot. Jerkbaits involve a lot more pauses.
And stuff like that. Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Now there is a technique, and this is something that I've seen Timmy Horton do. Again, Andre, it will only wear you out if you're using the wrong equipment. So Timmy Horton has designed a crankbait. It's called the Azuma Z Boss, and it's a suspending deep diving crankbait. And with his Z Boss 20 and 25, they run to like 20 and 25 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So he can get them to get down on the bottom. So they'll dig down on the bottom. And he said if you like jerk it just right, it'll kick the weight transfer to the back and it'll sit on the bottom like this. And you can just, if you reel it slow, it'll just slide through let me get this back on. It'll just slide through the water without vibrating, which is kind of neat. That's pretty cool because now you have, this isn't very natural, but how natural is something coming through the water like that as far as the action?
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I would like to actually see that. Footage of that.
He's got on his, I can't remember if it's on his YouTube or it was on his TV show. Like he's actually got footage of it underwater doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Of it, it hits the bottom, it kicks up, kicks the weight transfer to the back, and then you just slow reel it, and it just kind of comes through the water like this. It's actually pretty cool.
Interesting. You could utilize that in the Forbidden Zone.
Also, videos of him catching giants doing that on Pickwick. So gear, yes sir. Timmy Horton Outdoors. Funny story about Timmy Horton. I had Timmy Horton always seemed like a cool dude to me, and I'm not saying I've never met Timmy Horton, so I'm not saying this is just repeating what somebody said. My rider in Mr. Bass this year was a marshal for Timmy Horton.
Mr. Bass.
And said that Timmy was not that great to fish with. That he was not that nice of a person. So kind of poked a hole in my cloud there.
Right.
So I've always liked Timmy Horton. I will crank as deep as a crankbait will go. I have long lined 10XD into 30 feet. And that's about as deep as I can get a crankbait to go.
Why don't you throw?
And you can't long line in a tournament, so it's.
What's long lining?
So long lining is bomb your crankbait out as far as you can, turn your trolling motor the other way, free spool it, and then just start driving until you're almost out of line.
That's not legal to do.
Not legal. That is. So you can get a 10XD on a bomb cast, 25 feet.
I guess that's like trolling almost.
You can get, if you long line, you can get that down to 30, 32 feet on 10-pound line. So a lot of guys will do that in the like those Tennessee River lakes, and you can just get them down. I mean, you can get them down super deep, and then you're keeping it in the strike zone. I mean, you got 150 yards of line on your rod. Well, you can't cast a crankbait 150 yards, but I can roll it out with my trolling motor, and then just that's all you're doing. I mean, you're
just torque it in.
You're just reeling it in for, you got, instead of being at that max depth, or say you make a bomb cast with a 10XD, you can probably throw that on a bomb cast 50 yards, 50, 60 yards, max depth. You're only getting about 15 yards of it being at its max depth, give or take. It's going to take a while for it to get down, and then you got about 15 yards in that max depth, and that's going to start to come back up. So that's like maybe a little longer than that. I would say about half your cast length is going to be in that strike zone. But if you're a long lining, well, now you're having it in the strike zone for 100 yards, so you can cover 100 yards of ledge, in one sweep.
Gotta check something real quick.
So, what's going on, Kevin? Yeah, he always seemed nice to me, Kevin or Martin. But I'm just going like maybe he's just. I kind of feel like he might be just like super focused when he's fishing, and that can kind of rub off the wrong way. I get that way sometimes too, so I can completely understand that. But Timmy Horton's he's always been one of my favorite fishermen. So I'm not gonna let what some random dude said sway my opinion on him. So deep crankbaits. I fish really only two brands of crankbaits when I'm deep cranking. I fish either Rapala or striking. As far as deep cranking, when you're getting that deeper, striking makes the best deep crankbait that's out there. They just catch more fish. I don't know what it is when you get into that like 6XD, 8XD, 10XD, they just catch more fish. I don't know if it's the sound, if it's the vibration, but striking has perfected that deep crankbait. Up to 20 feet. It depends on, sometimes it'll depend on the action. So if I want a little subtler action, I'll throw a Rapala. Rapala's got a little tighter wobble, where like your 6XD is just super wide, noisy. I mean, they're super loud, where there's just a
very limited amount
of sound and a much tighter wobble. So that's kind of where I really only throw those two. I'll either throw a Rapala or throw a straight game when I'm throwing deep. I've got a couple Spros that I've tried out and have had some success with. I have a flat side Spro that dies to like 18 feet. Mm-hmm. And I've had some success with that, fishing on Leanna. But
what's up, Kevin?
For the most part, I'm either throwing Rapala or striking, because in my opinion, those are the two best deep cranks.
Kevin in the house.
Kevin Peon Parsons.
Kevin Peon Parsons. There he is.
God, that picture frames, man. It just screams child molester.
It's just, God damn, Kevin. Do something with that, man.
So, Rapala and striking. And I'm going to go through just a few baits here, just to show you the different kind of baits that I throw, what kind of depths that they run, just so you can kind of get an idea of if you're looking to fish a particular depth, or if your home lake is a certain depth and you want to try to fish in some of that deeper stuff, so you can get an idea of what kind of crankbait you might want. So I'm going to start with a crankbait that I throw a lot in a lot of places around here, Upper Bay, Conowingo, and that's a striking 5XD. And the 5XD runs about like 13 to 15, mm-hmm. Somewhere in that range. It's really good depth for
around here,
Conowingo, some of the deeper areas in Susquehanna, Northeast. You can really get a lot of use out of this crankbait, because if you think, oh, well, I need to fish, 15 feet of water to throw a 15-foot crankbait. Like, well, no. You throw a 15-foot crankbait in like 12 feet of water, because you always want it touching bottom. Mm-hmm. I said that last time. I'm going to say it again when we talk about where to fish these. So 5XD, nice little crankbait. And I want to know, I want to know if you guys notice a pattern when I show you these crankbaits. So there's a 5XD. See, that's a blueback herring color. Going up a little deeper, you have your DT14. So you want that more subtle action. Just take notice of the color. Your DT16.
I haven't noticed a pattern yet. What is it?
6XD. So remember when I said about the DTs? So your DT14 dives to 14 feet. Your DT16 dives to 16 feet. Strike King's a little more. You kind of have to read into it and go test it out to see what they dive. So this is a Strike King 6XD, and this crankbait might be responsible for more tournament winning than any other crankbait ever made.
Now,
it just crushes in when there's a deep crankbait bite. So this is going to run 6XD is going to be in that 17 to 19 foot range. So 10-pound line, you can get it down.
The 6XD is in a 17 to 19 foot range.
Yes.
See, that's the difference in like your depths and how they rate them.
Yeah. So 17 to 19.
Rapala, that's very user friendly. DT.
Yeah, and the DTs are really they're kind of basing that on line size.
What is this one?
That's a DT20. So that's my next one here.
DT20.
So this is a D20. DT20 actually, because they have such a big bill, sometimes with big deep crankbaits, that big bill will float on top of the water. So when you start to reel it, it'll just like skid across the water until it catches and then it goes down. So the DT20s, you'll see that metal disc in the front. So that actually weights the bill. So the bill will sit when the bait floats on top of the water, the bill will sit like this. So the bill is always going to catch the water and go down. Then we get into the big crankbaits, and these are what I love throwing big, like these big crankbaits. So this is a Strike King 8XD. This is going to get you 19 to 22 feet. I can get these down to about 21, 22 feet, on a real long cast. And then that is the big daddy. That is the Strike King 10XD.
That is a massive.
That is for comparison,
crankbait.
But compared to the size of your hand,
that is a huge crankbait.
It's I think it's 4 inches without the bill. I think it's 6 inches long, counting the bill, something like that, 6 or 7 inches long. But this is, when you need to get deep. Yes, they do. They tell you exactly what depth they are, and you can just look at the bill and go, "Oh yeah, this one goes to 16 feet." That's it. That's what I love about them, Mark, because I'm lazy. So this is your 22 to 27 foot. These are throw it on 10-pound line. You can probably get it down to like 27, 28 feet on a really, 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 really long cast. On average, I'd say I usually throw it on 12-pound line. I can get it 24, 25 pretty easily. And it's
I can only think of one area you're really utilizing that around here.
Where's that?
Conowingo.
I have thrown this on Conowingo quite a few times, but this is going to be. So when you throw in these really big crankbaits, you got to think you're targeting fish that are eating bigger baits.
Mm-hmm.
So gizzard shad lakes. While there are gizzard shad on Conowingo, that is not the primary forage up there. So it tends to be a little bit oversized for Conowingo.
Mm-hmm.
But on like Loch Raven, 10XD will catch them on Loch Raven. Anytime you're in a gizzard shad lake, your big oversized crankbaits are gonna play. 12-pound fluoro, Brian. 10XD, I throw on 12-pound fluoro. Same with all my deep crank. I do almost all my deep cranking on 12-pound fluoro. Just like my other crankbaits, though, I'll change line size if I need to adjust depth a little bit. Right, so if I need something to run a little bit deeper or a little bit shallower, I'll move up the line or down the line. I am not afraid to respool my rod while I'm on the water. That's why I keep.
Do you just waste an entire spool of good line?
Would you rather waste an entire spool of good line, or would you rather catch fish?
I'd rather have another rod combination.
Okay, well, you can do that, but
you do that. You only have like 50.
I only keep like 30 in the boat.
That's what I said. 50. I said 50. You said 30 in the boat. That means obviously there's another 20 at home.
Maybe like 15. But for like deep crank, I really only keep like one deep crank rod, so I'll just change out the line. Now, keep in mind that if you're not running backing on your reels, you're wasting line. Basically, I'm only putting
backing
as much line on my reel as I usually go about 20 feet more than what I think my longest cast is going to be. So if I think my longest cast is going to be 150 feet, so 50 yards, I'm going to put 160 feet of line on.
That's a massive cast, 50 yards.
Well, not when you're throwing them 2-ounce crankbait. That'll just.
I'm not throwing. I can barely throw swim baits 50 yards.
I can actually. So depending on the rod, I think it's actually harder to throw a big swim bait far than it is to throw a smaller bait far. Not like a 1/4 ounce bait or something.
Aerodynamics and shit like that.
I can. I'm trying to. So like a spook. If a vixen, I can almost spool a rod throwing a vixen. It's just an aerodynamic topwater. It's straight, it's narrow, it always casts with the tail first. It doesn't catch anything up. So you kind of have to judge that on the bait you're throwing. Well, same thing with these. A lot of your swim baits don't have weight transfer systems.
That too. So
this has a giant weight transfer system. So when you cast, all the weight's in the tail, so it's always going out like that. Where your swim bait, is going out through there. So you can throw a lot of these baits farther than you can throw a big swim bait.
Brian says, I know some guys use mono, and I know that we covered that on the last Tackle Tuesday, but remind me why some people prefer mono over fluorocarbon. And I remember that my initial thought to the mono over fluorocarbon was your depth, but in reality, you're only getting a 6-inch difference.
Stretch. It's about stretch. So anytime you're throwing a treble hook bait, you need some give. Right. And I prefer to use a very limber rod, a very moderate action rod to get that, and throw fluorocarbon. If you throw a little less moderate rod, you can go to mono. I think mono has too much stretch. It's got too much stretch for me. If it works for you, by all means, go for it. Mm-hmm. I have a buddy, we both crank a lot. And he throws 10-pound mono all the time. That's what he cranks with. 10-pound mono all the time. Doesn't matter what kind of crankbait he's throwing. Deep crank, shallow cranks, 10-pound mono, and it works for him. I have another buddy who throws all of his chatterbaits on mono. He throws chatterbaits on.
Damn. So, okay.
He throws chatterbaits on. 15-pound big game.
The fluorocarbon has a decent amount of stretch in my opinion.
So fluorocarbon has more. There's two different kinds of stretch. So that is true to a point, Dustin. I actually still throw fluorocarbon in the cold. I've never really ran into a problem with it, but it does get very unmanageable. You get a lot more memory with fluorocarbon when it's cold.
I think brand has a lot to do with it as well. I think there's different brands that handle the cold water shit better than.
Yeah, fluoro gets real stiff in the cold.
Yeah.
So it can, if it's real cold, you might want to switch to mono, but like Chad said, I think your higher quality fluorocarbons are.
If you throw in that yellow label, I don't know what you're doing.
Or Tatsu. I'm a big fan of Tatsu. I just can't afford to throw it.
Tatsu?
Yeah. Cigar Tatsu. It's the only leader material I use.
Seaguar and Vizex is what I.
So Seaguar and Vizex is what I use for that's like my everything line. For my spinning rods, I only throw Tatsu. That's all my leaders are. It's like $50 a spool, but it's badass. It's so good. But mono works good. So like I was saying, use what you're comfortable with. Confidence in your equipment plays such a big role in being a successful fisherman. If you're not confident in your, I know people who absolutely hate fluorocarbon, and they'll try it out, and they'll end up losing fish, and they're like, oh, it's just damn fluorocarbons. Well, it's because I think a lot of that's just a mindset going into it. Like you think it's going to be bad, so you don't give it the opportunity to see the benefits of it. What are the benefits of mono, or I'm sorry, the benefits of fluoro versus mono? I can feel the bottom so much better with fluorocarbon.
Sorry.
So, bottom content. What's on the bottom? With mono, I can't really feel that much on the bottom. I can feel my baits hitting stuff, but I can't tell what it is. However, I switch to fluorocarbon, I can tell the difference between whether I hit grass or I hit wood or I hit a rock.
Mm-hmm.
Where with mono, I don't really get that feel. And I fish both. I fish mono on crankbait rods for a long time. I fished fluoro and decided to switch over to mono because I thought maybe I needed a little more stretch, because I was losing a bunch of fish. And I fished it for a long time, but I lost so much feel. I gave up so much feel to get that extra stretch that I don't think it was worth it to me. But yeah, so
I have no monofilament with it. None.
I have 2 rods. They're both popper rods. I have one for small poppers and one for large poppers. And that's it. And
see, I kind of throw
smaller spooks and stuff.
I throw my poppers on a really light rod with braid.
Yep.
So to kind of balance out where I need my I need the rod to give more because I'm using braid on treble hooks.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I throw my if I'm throwing like the small Rico, I throw that on a 6'6" medium rod.
Scuba Steve might be watching, and Scuba Steve I think has a rod with mono on it that he throws his poppers on sometimes.
I prefer, so the other thing that I prefer mono for when I'm fishing like poppers or walking baits is if you miss a fish and you're fishing braid, it just wraps around the hooks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where you're fishing mono because it's stiffer, it just doesn't wrap. Same thing with buzzbait. That's why I fish a buzzbait on fluorocarbon.
Man, that is a freaking really good point, and I might actually try a monofilament on one of my rods now because of that.
You get that blow up, you yank it back, or you try to. Of course, the first fish I caught the first time I went to Lake Anna on the hot side, the first fish I caught down there was on an 8XD.
You guys go down there every year for fun, or is it for tournament? Or?
No, we go down there every January for fun, fish the hot side. It's a warm water discharge coming out of a power plant.
So you know somebody over on the hot side?
We Kevin does. He knew there's a guy that rents out a house down there, and we've rented it out every year for the last few years.
Dude, I'm trying to get in on that. It sounds like fun.
You got to talk to Kevin. He runs that shindig. So
Kevin, I'm gonna message you, bro.
Yeah, so we go down there every year just for fun. We go down for usually it's on like MLK weekend. So we'll go down on drive down on Thursday night. We can fish Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday morning, and then drive home Monday afternoon.
Cold days.
Sometimes they're cold. But it's worth it because last year I caught a fish on top water while it was snowing.
In Anna?
Yeah. So the hot side of Anna is separate from the main side. So
the right. Yeah.
The hot side's a warm water discharge.
Mm-hmm.
So the water temperature, there's 3 pools. Pool 1's closest to the power plant, then pool 2, they're cooling pools. So it gets progressively cooler as it goes down. And pool 1 in January you'll have 70-degree water. Pool 2, will be 50s to 60s, and pool 3 will be low 50s. So they'll still eat top water. They'll eat top water all over the hot side. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. You can catch fish on top water in the snow.
That's badass.
That's ridiculous.
That's badass.
And you can catch a lot of them. I mean, they'll come up schooling, in that time of year. Like they'll just come up schooling. They'll just start like busting bait, like out in the middle of the lake, and you just throw a spook out there. Boom! It's freaking awesome. Kevin knows that side of the lake pretty well. He tends to kick my ass down there quite frequently. But
Kevin Peon Parsons.
Yeah, see, Kevin says he's caught him on top water in the snow in a foot of water. Because the water's 60 degrees. It's like, it's basically like fishing in springtime. So it's pretty cool. But I do a lot of deep cranking while we're down there because there are a lot of deep fish down there. And it's fun. And that's, it's one of my favorite things to do. So I throw an 8XD down there a lot. I've got a lot of fish down at 8XD. So we talked about the equipment you need. We talked about the baits that you need. Well, how are we going to fish these? So I said at the beginning of the show, this is primarily a summertime deal for me. When those fish move out, when the water gets warm, those fish move out deep and they're out there eating those schools of shad. Happens less, again, this is deep cranking. This is not going to apply as much to tidal water as it is to like your reservoirs, Conowingo, Loch Raven, Pretty Boy. Those fish are going to move out deep, and the warmer it gets, the deeper they're going to go. So deep cranking, especially early in the summer when they first move out there, is the ticket. When they first move out there and they haven't been fished over a lot, I mean, you can run a big crankbait through there and you find the right school and just whack them every cast. Once you get that school fired up, once you catch the first one, get it unhooked and cast in there as fast as you can, because you're going to get that school fired up and they're just going to eat like every cast for 5 or 6 casts. So it's primarily a summertime deal. So time of year, we're focusing, more on the summer months, early summer post-spawn fish that are just moving out. They're moving out there to eat. They haven't got that super, super hot water yet where they're going to get kind of lethargic.
Mm-hmm.
Ledges are probably the biggest thing that I look for when I'm deep cranking. And that ledge can be, from 6 feet dropping off to 10 feet, or 8 foot drops off to 12. Those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. You're looking for drop offs. You're looking for deep grass edges, which we don't get a lot around here. But if you go to Deep Creek, a lot of deep grass edges out there. That's a good place to throw a deep crankbait. Maybe not a 10XE on Deep Creek because, small bait, but, your deep grass edges, ledges, deep creek bends or channel bends.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not talking like a creek, like, trying to find a good example of a creek. Like, I'm not talking about like Muddy Creek, not a creek like that. I'm talking about a creek channel. So in your lake, anywhere you have a creek that comes into the lake, there's probably a creek channel that runs way out into the lake that runs into the main river channel. And that's, again, it's still a ledge, but it's a creek channel. Any of those deeper creek channels, that's what the fish are going to sit in. When they're waiting for that bait to move, they're going to sit right in those edges. Morning, so they might move up into the flat to feed,
mm-hmm.
and then they're going to suck back down into that creek channel. So those are a good spot to target. I almost exclusively hard bottom. Unless I'm cranking like a grass edge, I'm looking for hard bottom. I'm looking for rocks. I want to be able to hit those rocks. And as I've said before, contacting structure is the key to getting bites on a crankbait. If you're not down there digging this thing into the rocks, you're not getting bit.
Yeah.
You want this thing. You want this thing digging in the rocks, kicking off the rocks, getting all crazy.
I will say here recently, I've utilized not deep cranking, but we've utilized crankbaits here recently in certain circumstances, and that's kind of been a decent thing for us in specific areas. Just getting one down and kind of ticking that right on the edge of those grass lines, or getting in there and just ticking the top of the grass.
Yeah, sure.
Utilizing that crankbait right now has been kind of a ticket thing.
You get a nice you get a nice high tide, you get a little bit of water over the grass, or like a baby 1- or something like that over the grass. That's the thing. But the key is you gotta touch the grass.
And spinner baits. I lost my SV3 yesterday, which sucks.
That sucks.
Yeah, damn snakehead, I'm pretty sure.
So you're looking for hard bottom, grass lines. If it's a sand bottom, if there's no, unless there's some tunk rock or something out there, it's not really a good place to crankbait. I'm probably going to drag, if I know there's fish there, yeah, I'm probably going to look for fish, in that situation, utilize my electronics. If I know there's a school of fish, because just because it's sand doesn't mean there aren't fish there.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes, you get a sandy point, they'll sit on that sandy point. If I know that there are fish there and I can see them on my graph, I'm going to throw a crankbait at them. Smallmouth, I've said this before. I said this in our last show. Smallmouth like to feed up. Sometimes you want to, if you're fishing specifically for smallmouth, and you're not getting, you're hitting those rocks, you're making your bottom contact and you just can't get bit. Try, if you're fishing 12 feet of water, throw like a DT10 where it's like 2 feet over the bottom. Sometimes smallmouth really like to feed up. So, sometimes running that crankbait a little bit over the bottom is the ticket. Largemouth, fishing for largemouth, just put it on the bottom and, crank it through as much structure as you can. Grass, wood, rock, whatever it is. But you have to hit the structure. So, I said there's a common trend when I was showing.
That's key. Yeah, structure contact is absolutely key.
So I said there was a common trend when I was going through my crankbaits, and Chad said he didn't see what it is. So if you notice,
which was a joke.
Look at the colors. They are 100% all bait fish colors.
They're all pretty much shad pattern.
Pretty much.
You always have to go with a 1 or 2 offset color in case they're dialed in on something different.
Dirty water.
That's the 6XD.
That's the 6XD chartreuse blackback.
And then the Rappel DT20.
And
I like this like blue back chartreuse. What is it like?
That is Caribbean shad.
Caribbean shad. I have a rockfish trolling bait that's a man's.
Oh, the stretch 20. Is it like this?
Yeah, it's like a man's stretch 8.
Stretch 8.
It's a stretch 8, and it's in a color like this, but I can't remember what the color is.
So,
it's fantastic.
These are all shad colors. So if you're on a lake with a lot of yellow perch, yellow perch colors can work too. But they're all bait fish colors. I rarely throw a deep diving crankbait in a crawfish color. Mid depth, maybe up to like 14 feet. Yeah, I'll throw a crayfish bait, but I'm not gonna lie. I've never heard of too many crayfish hanging out in 25 feet of water. Do they hang out in 25 feet of water? I don't know. It doesn't seem like a place a crayfish would be to me. But again, this also goes to I'm fishing these mostly in the summertime.
I feel like there's
in the summertime,
20 feet of water.
Well, there's crayfish now on my 10XD. But in the summertime, the bass primarily are feeding on bait fish.
I made Paul some hook guards so he doesn't hook himself on his way home.
That's the way I have boxes.
Well, he'll probably put it in his pocket because he's addicted to it.
I am. So in the summertime, bass have transitioned from feeding on crayfish to feeding on bait. They're almost exclusively feeding on bait in the summertime. There are some certain circumstances, like if you're grass fishing, stuff like that, where they're going to eat a lot of crayfish. But when you're deep cranking, you're looking for you're 100% looking for fish that are feeding on bait fish. That's why they're out there. They're not out in 25 feet of water to eat crayfish. If they wanted to eat crayfish, they'd be in 4 feet of water. Well, just why would they expend the energy to go out there? They're going out there to eat shad. And this happens a lot on Conowingo. The fish on Conowingo, especially in the summertime, will go very, very deep, and they're out there because they're shad out there. They're not eating anything else. You catch them and they puke up they'll puke up like 5 shad on the way to the boat. Not necessarily how I target them all the time.
I had a bass puke up snakehead fry last night.
Yeah, they like that too. So, but all my deep cranks are going to be crankbaits. Of course they are. They're going to be bait fish colored. So anything that I'm throwing over, we'll say over 15 feet, I'm throwing in a crayfish color. Or throwing in a bait fish color, shad color, perch, shad color, perch color, some kind of bait fish color. Chartreuse blackback. I like chartreuse blackback. Especially in a lot of the places around here because the water's not super clear. So it just gives it a little, it's still a shad color, but it just gives it a little more visibility. I throw that on Conowingo a lot. I've caught a lot of fish on Conowingo on the 6XD. There's some juice for you guys. If you ever want to try deep cranking 6XD on Conowingo, just go find yourself 18 feet of water and make bomb casts and reel it as fast as you can.
This is not something that I have deep cranking specifically. Now, shallow cranking, your mid-depth cranking, all the time. Utilizing it all the time. But the deep cranking is not something that I have actually utilized very much. And I think after this particular show, I'm kind of ready to maybe try that out a little bit. I was even thinking about maybe going out and getting a different rod combo.
Yeah. Get you I prefer glass rods. Again, like I do with all my crankbait rods. Actually, I have to get another crankbait rod too. I broke my deep crank rod.
I wouldn't have to talk Scuba Steve too hard into it either. If this is not one of our favorite ways to utilize trying to catch bass, I don't know what is.
It's fun, and
it goes around the boat.
Once you figure it out, it's like I don't want to do anything else.
Yeah. Once you figure it out, this is just the most fun way.
Because the cool thing about deep cranking is when fish move deep, they tend to school. So if you're fishing out and say you're fishing in 20 feet of water and you catch a fish, odds are if they're in 20 feet of water, there's 10 more with it. There's 5 more with it. It's not the only fish there. When they get out deep, they tend to stop being loners, and then they group up. So if you can catch, if you can catch 1 out of 20 feet, you can probably catch 2 or 3 off that same exact spot, that same exact cast. Whereas when you're fishing shallow, a lot of times when you're fishing shallow, you're catching loner fish. I'm not saying that you can't catch, I'm not saying that's always the case, but up shallow, sometimes you get a nice piece of structure. It'll hold multiple fish, but they're not schooled up. They're sitting on that piece of structure because it's a large piece of structure. You don't really school up on it, except in the springtime sometimes. But that's when the fish are moving. This is more of that summertime. I'm talking about summertime. And if you catch fish shallow in the summertime, they're typically loner fish. There's going to be one fish on this piece of structure. You get the next piece of structure. There's a fish there. Or there might be a couple of fish holding on there, but they're not holding on there because they're schooled up. When they're schooled up, they're chasing bait and they want to eat. And that's when it gets fun to deep crank because, you can, you get on the right spot. You can catch them every cast. And, that's I said this earlier, when you catch one, unhook it, cast to the same spot as fast as you can. Because a lot of times catching one will fire that school. And when that school gets fired up, they will eat and they will eat. And you can just keep throwing in there until that school turns off. And, there might be 5 fish in that school. There might be 100 fish in that school. You never know, unless you looked at them on live scope or, you can see that, there's 4 or 5 fish over there. Or you You went through that aerial side scan. You saw, that there were 4 or 5 fish, sitting there on that, on that ledge. You went over a down scan. You might see that there's 4 or 5 fish there, but just because there's 4 or 5 fish there when you went over it, the cool thing about those deep spots is they tend to be areas where fish move through.
Mm-hmm. So
I might have, if I'm fishing a tournament, I might have scanned over in practice and I saw 4 or 5 fish, especially early. By the time you're, 3 or 4 days later when your tournament rolls around, 50 other fish that just got done spawning just moved out to that spot. So, they can load up, those deep spots can load up really well. When you first find them, you find a couple of fish, you go back 4 or 5 days later, and the next thing you know, there's 50 fish on it. And those are the cool things, the cool spots that I love. Then the reason I love deep cranking is because you can just,
when you find them, you can really, really get on them.
Yep. That's my deep cranking knowledge, the best of my deep cranking knowledge. It is something I really like to do. I'm fairly good at it. I just don't get the opportunity to use it around here that much.
Yeah.
Done it a lot in Tennessee. Done a lot in Texas. Did quite a bit in Texas when I was down there. Done a lot in Tennessee. Done a lot of Lake Anna. But as far as like around here, limited to really Conroe and Go and Deep Creek. I've done quite a bit on both of those. Also, Piney Run. Piney Run. It's a little tiny reservoir. It's electric only, but you can put like a regular boat in there. You just have to. They just tell you to tilt your motor out of the water, and you can really get on a good deep crankbait in there.
That's cool.
And you can be deep cranking. You might catch a largemouth. You might catch a 20-pound striper. Yeah, there's some huge stripers in this little lake. And by little, I mean you can on trolling motor. If you put your trolling motor on like 100, you can be from like one to the lake to the other in like 15 minutes.
Okay, that is pretty small. Yeah, that is pretty small.
I think it's it might be like 400 acres, 400 or 500 acres or something like that. But really cool place. Super, super clear water, a lot of deep grass. I've caught some good fish deep cranking in there.
Is there anything else on the deep cranking subject that you think we need to cover tonight?
So we covered line. I always throw, personally, I throw fluorocarbon. Throw what you're comfortable with.
Covered rods.
12 pound. Make sure you throw 10 or 12. I don't like throwing anything heavier unless I'm trying to make them run shallower. Trying to make it run shallower, I'll throw heavier, but I don't like throwing anything heavier than 12 pound. We talked about rods, medium heavy for your smaller deep crankbaits, heavy for your. No, you don't, Dustin. There's a charge for like out of county that you pay at the ramp. I don't think they open up till like 7 o'clock in the morning, so you can't get in there super early. But you just pay. You just pay your ramp fee when you're in there. So you just get there, pay your ramp fee. It's like X amount of dollars for Carroll County residents, and I think it's like
X amount.
I think it's like $7 for like out of county residents. It's not expensive, but it's a cool place. It's really cool in the springtime. You can catch some huge bags there in the springtime, like 23, 24 pounds. There's some really, really big fish in there. I haven't fished in quite a few years, but there used to be some really, really big fish in there. So rods, medium heavy for your smaller, heavy for your bigger crankbaits. You really only need the heavy, in my opinion, for your oversized crankbaits, 8XDs, 10XDs. Long, 7.6, 7.10, 7.11, 7.8. You want as long a rod as you can because you need to be able to make super long casts. You want a 5-3 to 1 reel, especially when you're throwing those oversized crankbaits.
Are you going to like a 200 series reel when you're throwing crankbaits like that?
So I do actually on my deep crank rod,
What's up, Lou?
My oversized crank rod, I throw a 200 series reel.
Okay.
mostly for mostly for the spool. It's not so much that I need a bigger reel to handle the bait, but I want the larger spool.
Exactly, for more line.
Well, it's not necessarily for more line, but it's so you if you have a low. I don't know, I've never paid $22 to fish Pioneer Run, but they have raised it since I fished there, so I know it's never been that much. So, lost train of thought. Damn it, Lou.
What was I saying? What we're talking about? I talked about we were going to the 200 series reel.
200 series reel, yeah.
And
okay, so spool capacity. So yes, it holds more line, but that's not why I want that. I want it because when I make that long cast, my spool diameter doesn't decrease as much. So if my reel holds 200 yards of line, it's a wider spool.
Yes.
And so those, this first 20 wraps around the spool, not really losing any.
It doesn't drain the spool.
Your gear ratio or your retrieve rate, when the farther down you get into the spool, will decrease the farther you get into the spool. So if you say I'm fishing, I fish a Untitled Chapter.
Right, because it's like this compared to this.
Exactly. So each rod, you're only making you're making a revolution of something this big, or you want to make a revolution of something this big.
Exactly. Which is gearing at that point.
Yeah, it's kind of gearing. It's physics. Physics, geometry, whatever you want to call it. But your inches per turn is what determines the speed of your crankbait. It's not so much the gear ratio, the inches per turn. So if you have a wide spool that holds a lot of line, well, you're going to get more inches per turn than if you have a narrow spool that you cast most of your line off of. Those first 20 cranks on the reel handle, you're not retrieving the lure as fast as you are with a big reel where you only cast a little bit of the line off. So it keeps so it's not so much for I think it's giving me more inches per turn, but it's making my retrieve more consistent.
Okay.
So if I cast all the line off my reel and I have I have that very few inches per turn, at first, the bait's going slower and it's getting faster as it's coming in. So because it's more inches per turn, if I'm just reeling the reel the same speed like I normally would, it's that bait's changing speed. 2, if I make that bomb cast and I make 5 turns of the handle, it gets down to the bottom and boom, I get bit.
Yeah.
If I casted all the line off, I can't. I gotta reel super fast to try to break up that line because I'm throwing a low speed reel. Again, it goes back to your inches per turn. If you're throwing 200 series reel, I can catch up going like this. I don't have to go like this to try to catch up to that fish because I'm bringing in, say, 6 inches per turn or 10 inches per turn, whatever it might be, versus when my spooled out Tattoo 100 is, only taking up, 5 inches per turn. So I could be reeling the bait, literally twice as fast with a 200 size reel. So yes, I do go to a 200 size reel when I'm throwing, especially when I'm throwing oversized cranks.
Big cranks like that. That's definitely something that was important to cover. Yeah, every detail matters when you're getting into very crank specific things. So
that goes, to be fair, that also goes to chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, any kind of moving bait. Yep. You got to pay attention to how much line you're casting off your spool. And always making sure that you're keeping your spool topped up, changing your line frequently and not letting it get down, because that changes things. Unless you want to slow it down a little bit and take some line off. No. It's a neat hack. You can slow your lure down by pulling like 20 yards of line off.
I'm not going through that much effort.
Me neither.
Me either.
I'll just reel slower.
Right on. Well, if we have covered pretty much everything that we
think
we're going to cover on the crankbaits tonight, I'm actually going to go fire up the grill. I think I'm going to make a couple steaks before I go to bed.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I'm pretty hungry.
Yeah, you can have that.
So, all right, everybody. We are done with tonight's crankbait discussion. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave a comment on the video. Send us a direct message. We'll get back to you with any information that we can to try to help you guys out. And look for us on Friday night for Friday Night Shenanigans. Thursday is the first day for the Open. So I'm sure we will have a lot to discuss about the first day of fishing for the Open on Friday Night Shenanigans. So if you don't have a chance to follow the Open, definitely jump on Friday night for Friday Night Shenanigans, and we'll get you guys all caught up on exactly what's going on and who's doing what and who's where.
Those boys they're going to be in for
they're in for a tough tournament, man. It's going to be a rude awakening. If fishing on the Upper Bay wasn't already tough as it is right now, you want to add all this rain and you're going to mud everything up. We're going to see who's got the balls and who don't.
I can tell you. So I ran down to the ramp down at Mariner Point tonight. Like I was working down.
It was just starting to clean up.
Oh no, it's just starting to get dirty. So when I came home at 3:00, the gunpowder at 40 was high and like yellowish brown. It looked like it looked like a freaking latte from fucking Starbucks. That's the color it was. I went down to the ramp and I'm like, pretty clean down here. Pretty clean at the ramp. So drove over whenever Foster Branch. Yeah, it's all going to be mud in, give it 2 tide cycles. Everything down there is going to be mud.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's bad. It's real bad.
Well, all right, y'all. We will catch you guys on Friday night for all the shenanigans and all the random discussion and bullshit that we bring to the table. Peace, guys.